Diana, I am really impressed with how well you're doing, and I'm really proud of all of you. I saw last week all the lovely posters you made to teach me about angles, so I decided to make my own so it can help me later on if I get stuck or if I need a bit of help.
Last week we learned about angles. Please pause the video and tell me what you remember. Well done! We know that when two meet at A, they make an angle. We know that when two straight lines or arms meet at a point or vertex, they make an angle. And we can see here some examples. We also know that we measure angles in degrees. We can use a protractor to measure angles, but for now we're going to be using our right angle tester. On Thursday we learned that all right angles are 90-degree angles, and we mark them with a square shape instead of the line curve that we were doing. In today's lessons, we're going to be comparing angles. Were you able to do Thursday's challenge? Did you find out about any other types of angles? Well, let's have a look together. We're going to start by going on a right angles hand. I'm going to ask you to mark in the letters all the right angles you can find. So, pause the video, write maths in capital letters and mark all the right angles you can see. Please make sure you're only marking the right angles. Remember, right angles are 90-degree angles. Feel free to use your right angle tester if needed. Let's have a look at what we've done. Are there any right angles in T? Have you marked them? How many right angles did you mark? I think the letter T has two right angles because on this side there are two straight lines that meet at a point and make a 90-degree angle, and it happens the same on the other side. I can see two straight lines meeting at a point and making a 90-degree angle. Do you agree with me? Let's check together. We're right. There are two right angles in T. We can see one here and the other one here. Are there any other letters in the word maths that have right angles? Well done. You're more than right. The letter H also has right angles. How many right angles did you mark? I think the letter H has 4 right angles because I can see here two straight lines that meet at a point and form or make a right angle. Here I can see another two lines or arms that meet at a point and make a right angle. Over here I can see two straight lines that meet at a point or vertex and form a right angle. Finally, I can see here two straight lines that also meet at a point and form our fourth 90-degree angle. Did you also spot 4 right angles? Well, let's check if we are right. We are. There are 4 right angles in H, and we can see them here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well done. You're doing a great job. So now that we've found all the right angles in the word maths, we're going to be looking for another type of angles. To do this, you will need the word maths that you wrote earlier on, and if possible, a different color pencil. Now, I'm going to ask you to mark any angles that you see that are smaller than a right angle. So please remember, a right angle is 90 degrees. And we want now to look for angles that are smaller than right angle. You can use your right angle tester to help you. Let's have a look together. Are there any angles in M? Did you have time to mark them? Do you think the angles in M, are they smaller or larger than a right angle? I found 3 angles in the letter M, and I think they are all smaller than a right angle. I know that a right angle is a 90-degree angle, and these angles here look like they are smaller than 90 degrees. Do you agree with me? Let's have a look together. We are right. Angles A, B and C, so we can see them here, A, B and C. You can label them, you can name them if you want to. They are all smaller than a right angle. We still have 2 lines that meet at a point and form the angle, 1, 2 and 3, but we can see that these angles are smaller than a right angle. Do you know how we call the angles that are smaller than a right angle? We call these acute angles. My go, acute angles. Your go. Well done. So we now know that right angles are 90-degree angles, and we also know that an acute angle is smaller than a right angle. Can you read this with me? An acute angle is smaller than a right angle. So it doesn't necessarily need to be this side. It could be even smaller or a bit larger, but always less than 90 degrees. So remember, when 2 straight lines meet at a point, they make an angle. We know from last week that right angles are 90-degree angles. And now we know that angles that are smaller than right angles are called acute angles. So we know that an acute angle is smaller than a right angle. We can see here, an acute angle is smaller than a 90-degree angle. Are there any acute angles in A? Can you mark them? Remember, you can look down here to see that a right angle is a 90-degree angle. An acute angle is an angle that is smaller than a right angle. So, can you find any angles in A that are smaller than a right angle? Well done! I can see that definitely there are some acute angles in letter A. How many did you find? I can see that there is an angle here, another one here, another one here, another one here, and lastly another one here. Are all of those angles smaller than a right angle? Would you say that all of those are acute angles? Well, now you're right. Not all of those angles in A are smaller than a right angle. I think there are 3 acute angles. 3 angles that are smaller than a right angle. And I think they are here. I think this angle is smaller than a right angle because I believe that if it was a right angle, this straight line will be going up here. It will happen the same here where I will have the line straight going to the side, and the same here where I will have a line going upwards. Do you agree with me? Do you think there are 3 acute angles, less or more? Let's check together. Well done, you're right. There are only 3 angles over here that are smaller than a right angle. Do you remember how these are called? You're right. These are called acute angles. So we can say that there are 3 acute angles in letter A. You're doing an amazing job. So now we found that there are 3 acute angles in letter A. What about the other 2? Are they smaller or larger than a right angle? I think these 2 angles here are larger than a right angle. And feel free, you can use your right angle tester to check if wanted. So, let's have a look. These 2 angles are larger than a right angle. And these angles also have a name. We call them obtuse angles. My go, obtuse angles. Your go. So now we know the right angles are angles that are 90 degrees. Acute angles are smaller than 90 degrees. And obtuse angles are larger than 90 degrees. So can you read this with me? Obtuse angles are larger than 90 degrees. Once more, obtuse angles are larger than 90 degrees. Finally, are there any angles in S? Can you spot any right angles? Can you see any acute angles? Remember, acute angles are angles that are smaller than a right angle. Can you see an obtuse angle? Obtuse angles are angles that are larger than a right angle. You are doing such a fantastic job. You are more than right. There are no angles in S because angles are made when straight lines meet, and there is not a straight line in the letter S. Your challenge now is to do the same as we've done with maths but with England. Please write down the word and mark all the angles that you can see. Then place them or write them in the right column. You got here the names of all the columns: obtuse angles, right angles, acute angles, and no angles. It could be that there are letters that have no angles. And you got a small key underneath. Pause the video and have a go. How did you find the challenge? Was it easy? Hard? I'm sure you're already experts, but let's check. Are there any letters with obtuse angles? Amazing! A has 2 obtuse angles, 2 angles that are larger than a right angle. What about letters with right angles? How many did you find? Brilliant! There are 2 letters that have right angles, 2 letters that have angles that are 90 degrees. Did you find any letters with acute angles? This is fantastic! You are right, there are 2 letters that have acute angles. They have angles that are smaller than 90 degrees. Angles that are smaller than a right angle. What about letters with no angles? Did you find any? Let's check together. Of course you're right. You are already experts. I can't believe how hard you're working. G and D have no angles because we know that when two straight lines meet at a point they make an angle, but we need to have two straight lines meeting at a point, and we got a straight line here, but then it meets with a curved line, and it happens the same with D. There's a straight line here and a curved line, so we cannot have any angles. We've learned lots of new vocabulary today. We know that when two straight lines meet at a point, they make an angle. We made these right angle tests last week that can help you to name all the different angles. So we know the right angles are angles that are 90 degrees. Acute angles are angles that are smaller than a right angle. And obtuse angles are angles that are larger than a right angle. And you can place your right angle tester on top to see the difference. Workbooks today we're going to be comparing angles and putting into practice everything we've learned. On page 151, we need to look at the different figures and state whether the angle shown is an acute angle, a right angle, or an obtuse angle. On page 152, we need to do exactly the same as we've done during our lesson. Please look at the different letters and mark the angles. You can use different colors to mark the different types of angles. Then write them down in the right column. On page 153, you need to only mark the obtuse angles. So you need to mark angles that are larger than a right angle, and then write the number of angles you found on its shape. Finally, on page 154, you've been shown a right angle. Your task is to draw an angle that is smaller than a right angle and write its name, and an angle that is larger than a right angle and write its name. Please make sure you use a ruler, as angles need to have straight lines. Miss Daniela and I can't wait to see your work. See you tomorrow, year 3!